And as Nigeria joins the rest of the world to celebrate the International Human Rights Day, the International Human Rights Commission is calling on world leaders to ensure the protection of all citizens. The head of the diplomatic mission of the International Human Rights Commission, Duru Hezekiah, says leaders should also ensure the provision of basic social amenities as it is a fundamental human right. Okay, we've now been joined by a Rise News analyst and lawyer, human rights lawyer, Frank Tietie. Very warm welcome to Newsnight. But the news is not cheery at all. You know, government officials and the police they're still the top violators of human rights in Nigeria, as revealed, you know, by the NOI poll. What are your thoughts here?
I don't think that government officials, together with the police, form a group that you may refer to as public servants, whose primary duty is to actually promote and enforce the human rights of Nigerian citizens. So it's such a debacle for the Nigerian citizen at this time that, you know, if you have a comparative analysis with the human rights situation last year, we're actually having a worsening situation right now, meaning that the real persons who are in dire need of human rights education are not the citizens themselves who own the rights, but those whose responsibility it is for which they get paid to protect human rights in Nigerians. So it's a real problem. So human rights education ought to be now directed to public servants, to those who work in the civil service, to policemen, law enforcement in general, the military, and the policy formulators. Because
can it be said to be a lack of knowledge on the parts of these people, lack of education? Can it be said to be ignorant, or just wanton display of power that is transient?
I think it's a matter of interest and the level of peculiar class struggle that we have in our country. So the desire to maintain, you know, the class interest in terms of this power play, you know, so, and then this, you know, determined disregard for citizens' rights. You know, it's important that Nigerian citizens must understand, and that's what we keep saying, that government actually is service. So the concept of public service is that all those who are employed in one way or the other in the federal government, state government, or local government are servants of the people for the interest of, for their interest in ensuring that there is security and their welfare is catered to. So until citizens begin to have that paradigmatic shift that will make them to demand from, you know, public servants their rights and the expectation that they do everything possible, they are desperate to fulfill their own rights. I'm talking about citizens' rights, fundamental human rights, and then all the basic human rights. Then until then, we will not see this change. Last year it was better. This year it's worse. One would have thought, in fact, new sets of rights violations that didn't occur last year when this same poll was conducted are now being you know, brought to the surface, talking about right to access you know, justice, especially by the victims of sexual violence. That didn't occur before, but now it's now topping the trend. Yes. Yeah. So Nigerians are actually, you know, there's an assault on Nigerians, not necessarily by you know, ignorance, but by a determined collective, you know, position of law enforcement. And law enforcement unfortunately forget that they are also part of the citizenry, and that what they do ignorantly may just be an extension of a certain interest that wants to perpetually keep the Nigerian people in subjugation.
Yeah, in subjugation. Let's look at the issue of free speech, for example, and the recent occurrence of the young man of the Federal University of Duse, you know, who the police were very, very quick to have slammed, you know, into prison custody. And of course, the brouhaha still brewing between who is the national chairman of ABGA and the clerical omission from the office of the registrar about a judgment given by the Supreme Court, affirming a party, you know, as the national chairman of ABGA. What, you know, are your main concerns here? You see some violations here?
Oh yes, certainly. I'll start with the first, which actually traumatized a lot of Nigerians. Because if you look at the provisions of Section 39 of the Constitution, which expressly provide that Nigerians are not only free to express any opinion they hold, the emphasis there is that they have a right to hold opinion. So you can think of any opinion of anybody. Now, when you express that opinion, you better be correct, because sometimes there are provisions, also legal provisions for protecting people's reputation. Some, people survive on reputation. We're in a political atmosphere where political reputation counts a lot. So people will go to a lot of extent to see that they exercise punitive measures to appear not to be the person that they have been accused to be or of. I think that's the case with the First Lady and that young man, and it's a very sad situation. Now, just like the Supreme Court
Justice, just quickly
how
does the human rights community, really feel
I
about that?
I think one thing that must be clear to everybody who works in public service, just like the Supreme Court has provided, is that, look, take a lot of cotton wool and block your ears, because every Nigerian has a right to attack you as a public servant, to have an opinion about you, whether you're doing your best. They can tell you that
whether the opinion is
whatever
right
it is,
or wrong.
It's about you must not, as a public servant, listen to those opinions if you dare to take any public office, particularly political office.
Okay, quite instructive there. Let's look at the Public Officers Act again, and we'll find a lot of public officers that the CNOI poll, described as amongst the top violators along with the police. Is it that the Inspector General, the new Inspector General of Police, he's come up with a lot of reforms. We've heard of 7-point agenda, 10-point agendas and the rest. And I think he's running on about 4 or 5-point agendas. How is the reform in the police, for example, trickling down?
I think that well, the positive thing I've seen in the police so far is the response to the judiciary, to law. The era and the regime where court orders are the mercy of law enforcement, particularly the police and then the military, I think that era is over. Particularly now that the courts have become very courageous in holding current holders of these institutional offices to account. It started with the EFCC when the court actually sent the EFCC chairman to prison, wrongly though, and then moved on again to also apply the same thing to the Inspector General of Police for acts that they did not commit personally but the office did. And so that era is going, and this new paradigm is very helpful. And to the way the police, Inspector General of Police, responded to it is quite encouraging, showing that there is now a commitment. You see, the real problem is a matter of culture in these institutions. You go to a local police station far away in Delta State, and you hear a constable on the counter shouting, even if the IG comes, I will not do it. And even if a court go and get whatever court order, nothing will happen. It was changing when you see the #1 policeman saying, no, we will obey every court order. And then I can tell you that there are a lot of orders that are awarding, costs, heavy costs, in running into millions, hundreds of millions against the police. So no, we are moving to the next stage where we'll expect this counsel to these victims of human rights violation by the police to now move to the Central Bank of Nigeria and garnish those accounts, even though the provisions of the Sheriff and Civil Process Act that is now standing in the way of persons who now require the consent of the Attorney General again. So the Attorney General now holds the real responsibility of ensuring respect for the court, for the orders of the court. And now, when we, accentuate the importance of the court in the eye of those who in the institutions and in the eyes of the citizens, then we can expect that human rights, orders of court will be respected. Let me tell you, the hope for human rights in our country rests in the courts, and that is the reason why the Fundamental Rights Enforcement Procedure Rules of 2009 is very instructive, very, very instructive, meaning that if courts were to obey that, if authorities and persons in this country were to obey the provisions of human rights in our country, then our country will just be headed to an El Dorado, because we believe very strongly the human rights approach is the only way that will, galvanize Nigeria from the present, doldrums, the economic or political doldrum that it is, into something that is, enviable. Interestingly, our laws in this country rank to be some of the best around the world when it comes to human rights. So the only reason why we are suffering, why our people keep reporting human rights violations by those who are supposed to protect the rights, is because there is this, this anomy, this zeitgeist that, oh, whatever it is just on paper, it can't work, nothing will come out of it. But we need that shift, and the courts appear to be gravitating towards that side. So there is hope. However bad that the NOI polls report is with regards to increasing violation of human rights of Nigerian citizens by institutional personalities, by like the police, there is still a whole lot of hope.
Well, a whole lot of hope, and I want you to underscore that, with democracy, the rule of law and security, when it comes to issues of national security, and say, this is a no-no, it's a no-go area. Are Nigerians really respecting that situation?
Oh, yes.
And how is this being accentuated?
Oh, okay. So we'll talk about the right to democracy, because we seem often to restrict the rights that are available to Nigerians to the rights that are contained in Chapter 4, that is between Section 33 to Section 46. But a whole lot more rights. Rights contained in African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which is not an international law, a Nigerian law. And that law that prescribes right to social security, right to self-determination, right to improve living standards, right to health, right to work, and right to education. So in that same law, you have the right to democracy, citizens' right to access the institutions of government and to participate in government. Now, with the understanding of that right, it becomes an insult of the highest order to attempt to to cajole a Nigerian to buy his votes. So Nigerians will understand that they are the ones that all of these institutions set up, whether the military, whatever it is, government, everything in government you see today is set up for the welfare and security of the Nigerian person. When the Nigerian citizen understands that, he should not collectively hold anybody who's aspiring to become president and look up to him and say, yes, what you've got to offer. Not that, the person will have the effrontery to say he wants to buy his vote. The idea is this: the Nigerian citizen, we must exalt him to that place where he understands that everybody in government at whatever level is accountable to him. Then we will begin to see a change in those who operate government and those who receive the services of government. Our country can be better. The hope can just be kept alive.
Absolutely. And finally, how would you react to, the lame duck attitude of some Nigerians, whose rights have been fundamentally abridged, and they say, I don't want trouble, don't worry, let him go. Maybe he's been assaulted by a law enforcement agent, like I was assaulted in Kano sometime when I went for, the installation of the emir and the marriage of the president's son. And the military officer, in trying to keep the crowd in check, gave me a terrible boot on my foot and the rest.
I have seen professors being flogged with koboko. I've seen even senior advocates being beaten up by...
And even a police officer too recently was flogged by a professor.
The real problem is impunity. So when the man who is holding the extended authority of the state through government is acting in such a manner in breach of standards, especially human rights standards, it is because of a culture of impunity that has been established. And when the victim of human rights is unwilling to report, is unwilling to pursue his rights, is because of a self-defeatist mentality that what else would come out of it.
How do you take that away? That's the main issue here.
See,
how is the rights community
today,
helping to
let me tell you,
that?
Today is International Human Rights Day. In celebrating the day the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was signed, was agreed to by the countries of the United Nations. Let me tell you this. In the preamble, it says that, look, it warns that unless the countries of this world begin to make concerted efforts to respect the human rights of citizens, then they should expect rebellion, they should expect instability, they should expect people taking laws into their hands. So it is in the interest of the establishment, it is in the interest of those who run government, it is in the interest of those who have interest in power, in the power configuration of this country, to ensure that first and foremost, take care of citizens' rights so that you can be at peace. They are not troubling you. They're not interested in becoming president. They're not interested in becoming governor. They're interested in give them their rights. The rights that you couldn't, allow them to have their rights. After all, their rights are inalienable. You can't trade it with it. You didn't give it to them in the first place. They are human rights. They are God-given. They are rights that they have because they are simply human. And at that point, when you observe those rights, when you enforce those rights, you can now guarantee peace. And I tell you, this country has gone through serious pains because of the war against insurgency. And I thought it would have been unnecessary if we just simply gave Mohammed Yusuf his rights. We probably would have had Boko Haram. So Boko Haram has a grant to have 40 states simply because it thought that its leaders' rights were not observed, were not enforced, were not recognized. So you see, even those who have taken arms against it will respect peace when they realize that this establishment, this entity called Nigeria, exists to protect the rights of everybody, irrespective of your position, irrespective of whoever you are, and they will give it to you because they are yours naturally.
Thank you so very much. No better place for you to drop the anchor there, Frank Tietie, Arise analyst as well as human rights lawyer. I know you're just coming from the international conference.
Oh, yes, human rights. We had a great time. It was a really celebration move. We are still having little to celebrate.
All right then.